Hello guys, welcome to my channel. The Less is More. So today also we will discuss an editorial from the Hindu because I found no any important editorial in Indian Express. So I pick up an editorial from the Hindu and it is all about sorry guys and it is about international relations, right? So let's start editorial. The problem with India's multi-alignment stand. What is the problem with India's multi-alignment stand? So China's recent mediation efforts to resolve the Ukraine crisis have once again spotlighted India's approach to conflict resolution. By holding the North Atlantic Treaty Organization's eastward expansion responsible for instigating the war, by painting America as the biggest obstacle to ceasefire, by exploiting the differences among Western countries regarding the extent of support to Ukraine, by further cementing the Beijing-Moscow relationship and ensuring the survival of the Vladimir Putin regime. China has effectively positioned itself in opposition to the American approach. This is not how India views its role in resolving the conflict. So, China has effectively positioned itself in opposition to the American approach, right? And this is not India's approach. India has increasingly used varied symbolic instruments of power to enhance its soft power appeal. Symbolic instruments. India has used what? Symbolic instruments of power. Prime Minister Narendra Modi now projects India as the mother of democracies and as a moral force to enforce global peace. In sharp contrast to the Chinese President Xi Jinping's first outreach last month to the Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky. Since the Russian invasion, Mr. Modi has spoken to Mr. Zelensky many times. So, in contrast to Xi Jinping, first outreach last month, since Russian invasion, Modi has spoken to Mr. Zelensky many times. In October and December last year, Mr. Modi, in his telephonic conversation with Mr. Zelensky, had expressed India's solidarity with Ukraine while extending the support for peace efforts. India has expressed its solidarity with Ukraine and support for peace. And in September, Mr. Modi had publicly told Mr. Putin that today's era is not of a war. So, in above paragraph, we have seen that how different types of traits China is using to position itself in opposition to the American approach, and this is not the view that India have, right? Okay. This is not the view that India have, and what India did, we can see in the second paragraph, using symbolic instrument as a soft power. Okay, mother of democracy, moral force, global peace. Then in third paragraph, author tries to show what, that only this Mr. Jinping, Mr. Jinping did is just first time outreach to Ukraine, while India has spoken many times to Ukraine. express what? Solidarity, extending support for peace. Then third, Modi has told Mr. Putin publicly that this is not the era of war. Okay, a remark that seemed to be a reprimand to Moscow, which means a shock, like a shock. Even the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken felt compelled to describe this widely reported remark as significant. Washington understands the importance of India's continuous engagement with Ukraine because that is an important way of bringing New Delhi's response to the Ukraine war into alignment with its own. Okay. That is an important way of bringing New Delhi's response to the Ukraine war into alignment with its own. So, Washington understands India's importance, right? Because if New Delhi is engaged with US, it will what substantiate what Washington's view, right? So that is why US need India. Or the geopolitics of the Indo-Pacific and the Ukraine the geopolitics of the Indo-Pacific and the Ukraine conflict are in many ways what interconnected. Indo-Pacific and Ukraine geopolitics of Ukraine is many ways interconnected. The regular Modi-Zelensky interactions may be seen as what? Underscoring India's rising stature and recognition of its unique position in the emerging global order. Right, Modi-Zelensky interaction shows what? Highlights India's rising stature and recognition of its unique position. This is the two things that is important in the emerging global order. Despite Western criticism of India's continued energy imports from Russia, despite the criticism from Western of whom India's continued energy imports from Russia and export of excess refined Russian fuel to the European market. So it is seen as interaction seen as a India's rising stature despite of what? In Western criticism of importing Russian fuel, crude oil, and exporting these refined fuel to European countries. During Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister Amin Zaparova's recent visit to New Delhi, she remarked in a widely reported tweet that India wants to be the Vishwaguru, the global teacher and the arbiter. In our case, we have got a very clear picture. Aggressor against innocent victim. Supporting Ukraine is the only right choice for the true Vishwaguru. The hint here is that the Vishwaguru image that the government seeks for the country will remain imperfect. So, this image of Vishwaguru will remain imperfect if India refused to take a strong moral position on Russia's violation of Ukraine's sovereignty, right? So, the tool it will remain imperfect. This image will remain imperfect if India refused to take what? A strong moral position on Russia's violation of Ukraine's sovereignty, right? Nationalist ideas have always influenced the Indian state, contributing to their further proliferation in society and polity. So, nationalist ideas have always influenced the Indian state, contributing to their further proliferation in society and polity. The choice of the Vishwaguru phrase by Miss Zaparova is not accidental, as it is at the core of the Modi government's nationalist foreign policy discourse. Right. Nationalist ideas have always influenced the Indian state, contributing to their further proliferation in society and polity. Okay, the nationalist idea in society and polity. The choice of the Vishwaguru phrase by Miss Zaparova is not accidental, as it is at the core of the Modi government's nationalist foreign policy discourse. Right. So, choice of Vishwaguru is not a accidental phrase. It is at the core of the Modi government's nationalist foreign policy discourse. The contemporary salience of Vishwaguru image, which builds on historical trends in India's political thought, which seeking to emphasize the distinctiveness of the country's cultural ethos. This political thought seeking to emphasize what? Distinctiveness of the country's cultural ethos and civilizational values. Also highlights the unique nature of soft power in foreign policy debates. It highlights the unique nature of soft power in foreign policy debates. Soft power is simultaneously ubiquitous and ambiguous, accepted as significant, yet narrow in its policy impact. It should be understood as any other form of non-material power, which interacts with material resources or hard power, either enlarging their impact or making up for their absence. So, in some of these lines, author has defined what is soft power. Okay. Moving ahead, lack of hard power. That India lacks hard power has been acknowledged by Mohan Bhagwat, chief of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, the ideological fountainhead of India's ruling political dispensation. So, Mohan Bhagwat has acknowledged that India lacks hard power. In a recent speech, he had said that if India had been adequately powerful, it would have stopped the Ukraine war. He argued that Russia attacked Ukraine. It is being opposed, but nobody is ready to stop Russia because Russia has power and it threatens. Drawing a contrast with supposedly selfish global powers, Mr. Bhagwat asserted that if India had such material power in its hands, then such an incident, that is Ukraine war, would not have come before the world. Right. So, it has drawn a contrast with supposedly selfish global powers. It might be a US. While New Delhi has expressed its disapproval of the Ukraine war, it has avoided taking a clear picture. New Delhi has expressed its disapproval of the Ukraine war, but avoided taking a clear position in many UN resolutions on the issue. This may be understandable as India has often taken an evasive position on conflicts that involve its traditional allies. Right? India used to take an evasive position on whom? On the conflict that involved its traditional allies. However, critics are not unreasonable. That is, critics are reasonable in arguing that this ambiguity does not behove a nation. This ambiguity does not behove a nation aspiring to become a permanent member of the UNSC, which implies a commitment to speak as a global voice, against territorial aggression and rights violation, similar to what Russia has unleashed on Ukraine. Moreover, the normative pillars of the democratic, self-confident and morally superior Vishwaguru identity cannot be identical to those underlying the cynical hegemon. It cannot be identical to whom? Underlying the to those underlying the cynical hegemon, maximizing its power at all cost, bereft of any morality. While New Delhi's seemingly evasive position in the Ukraine war underlines India's traditional discomfort in viewing its national interest in binary terms, as well as Russia's military and geopolitical importance for India's military preparedness. So, while New Delhi's seemingly evasive position in Ukraine war underlines what? India's traditional discomfort in viewing its national interest in binary terms. Its views national interest binary terms. What are the binary terms? As well as Russia's military and geopolitical importance for India's military preparedness. Yet Russia's justification for its military action in Ukraine do not resonate among most of India's political elite. Right. These justifications are sometimes parroted by China, including the latest unabashedly pro-Russian statement by the Chinese ambassador in France regarding the legal status of the post-Soviet republics, with a view to reserving the right to use force against Taiwan. India has no such revisionist motives. Right. India's view on sovereignty converges with a universally acceptable Westphalian notion and thus clash fundamentally with the communist China's political philosophy of might is right. Democracies enjoy legitimacy globally, and this legitimacy can transpose an authoritarian ruler use of force into violence against the population. This legitimacy transpose authoritarian rulers' use of force into violence against the population. Ukraine is seen as a victim which is resisting aggression from an authoritarian neighbor. The Modi-Zelensky interactions highlight the fact that such narratives engender Indian sympathies for the victimized target. Nevertheless, the Ukraine war alone is not sufficient to undermine India's historical ties with Russia, which is based as much on New Delhi's military dependence on Moscow as it is on the anti-colonial strand of India's strategic autonomy doctrine. A pursuit of multi-alignment may have given New Delhi some diplomatic space in the ongoing war in Ukraine. However, it may not be sufficient for India to try to play the role of mediator between Russia and Ukraine. India currently lacks the material resources to match the extent of China's economic and military potential. Through his charm offensive of phony peace diplomacy, Mr. Xi's primary aim is to discourage Zelensky to launch the much discussed counter-offensive so that Russia's dependency on China rises further. Driven by the sunk cost fallacy, Mr. Putin has unleashed forces that have already done immense damage to Russia's global standing and offended most of the democratic world. Thus, the Modi government must ensure that India's refusal to condemn Russian belligerence Modi government must ensure that India's refusal to condemn Russian belligerence and continued increase in the import of Russian fuel is not interpreted as pro-Moscow approach. While India's ties with Russia are likely to be on a downward spiral, the piecemeal distancing from Russia will take a bit longer as New Delhi struggles to find some maneuvering space in the emerging nexus between Russia and China. Okay guys, so thank you for today. Signing off for the day.